And welcome back to the Aluminum Empire. This little video is going to help us focus on how to calculate rivet length. Rivet math is where we spend a good bit of time because some people are just not quite as comfortable with math, or maybe it's been a while and you're getting back in the habit. So we're going to look at rule number 2 when we're calculating the proper size rivets. Rule number 1 was to solve for diameter, and we covered that, 3 times the thickest sheet and then round up. Rule number 2, we're focusing on length. And rule number 2 is simply this: total material thickness. So we would take all of our stack up, no matter how many sheets of metal are there, and we would get our total material thickness. And then guess what? There's always a little second part. This time, instead of round up, once we've added our total thickness, then we're going to add 1.5 diameter. See, that's why we need that diameter information first in order to solve for this. So we're going to take our total thickness, add 1.5 diameters, and this time, instead of rounding up, we're going to round to the nearest length. So we're going to have to look up or down in order to solve this problem. We're going to practice one together. Let's say our total stack up. Once again, we'll start with our practice that we did on the first rule. We're going to take 2 sheets of 40 thousandths of an inch material. So the first part of the rule says we're going to take total stack up. So 40 thousandths plus 40 thousandths, well, that's 80 thousandths. Now the next part of this rule is to add 1.5 diameters. Now from the previous video, we determined that it was a number 4 rivet, and a number 4 rivet is also equal to 4/32, which is also equal to, if we simplified everything, 1/8 of an inch. But we need that in decimal form. See, it's a lot easier to work that way, so we could say 1/8, 1 divided by 8, is going to be 0.125. So here's what we could do. We could add this to our 80 thousandths, and that would account for 1 diameter, but the rule states 1.5 diameters. So we would also need to come back and add 1/2 of this number 4, which if we took half of 0.125, that would be 0.0625. Now if we add all of these together, we're going to end up, and let me do some calculations so I don't make a mistake, 0.080 plus 0.125 plus 0.0625 equals 0.2675. Now, that would be our total stack up plus 1 1/2 diameter. To get our total, we would need to round to our nearest fraction, or our nearest rivet length. Well, in this case, we're seeking the length, and remember from previous videos, the length is always going to be in 1/16 of an inch. So what if we just multiplied our 0.265 times 16, that's what we're seeking, we would end up with a 4.0 4.24. Well, now rivet lengths typically come in wholes and halves. There is a 4.5 rivet. That's a half size, not used every day, but used occasionally. Let's focus for the purpose on this course. Our dash number would need to be a -4. And if you say, well, why 4, Jay? Well, in this case, since that wasn't a 4.5 or higher, we would in this case round down to a -4 rivet. Now let's take a minute and let's review what we've just done. We started with our total material stack up. We added it to end up with 80 thousandths total. We took our diameter from Rule 1 in finding diameters, and we had determined there a number 4 was the right diameter for that stack up. So a number 4, we could simply say 4/32, or you could divide them and come up to 125 thousandths. So we added 1 diameter to our list, but the rule calls for 1.5. So we took that, halved it, we come back, put that on our list, then we simply totaled everything down to arrive at this number. We multiplied it by our desired denominator. Lengths are always in 16ths. We come up to a 4.24, and in this case, since it wasn't 4.5 or greater, we didn't go to a number 5, we rounded down to a -4 rivet. So based on this, rule number 1 and rule number 2 for this particular material stack up, we're going to end up with a 4/32 by 4/16 rivet. Now, if this was going to be our most commonly used rivet, that would be a 2117 rivet, single dimple. Remember that. That's the most commonly used, has a single dimple. It's called a field rivet. Now let's put the whole code back together and we'll go order some of these rivets. Well, to start with, we're going to be in that MS for that mil spec 20 category. I want to use a protruding head or universal head, so that's a 470. I want to use a 2117 or a single dimple. That would be an AD. And then finally, my diameter would be a 4 and my length would be a 4. So by applying those two rules and knowing a little bit about the code, we can take our sheet metal information only, use these rules, do the math, and we can determine the exact correct rivet, and then we can convert that into the code in order to order those rivets or to go pull them out of supply. I know that there's a lot going on here, so practice this. Use some different sheet thicknesses. I commonly like to throw out common thicknesses. Practice with that set of thickness and do number 1 from the previous video and number 2. If that one works well, let's try some different thicknesses and practice this. We'll cover it in class well, we'll help each other, but the idea at the end of the day, I want you kind of comfortable with this concept. Remember, follow the rules. If you have trouble, get in contact, see me in class. We're going to do plenty of these on the board. But for now, as always, do good work, be safe.